friends. This is your pal, Edward Zia speaking. I'm with my friend Adeel. Adeel, how are you tonight, my powerful friend, and what is happening in your world, Adeel?
I am very well, Ed. Thank you so very much for being with us tonight and being my partner on this very important webinar that we are doing for our audience. How have you been?
Really good. I've had heaps of clients, lots of traveling, lots of events, and I've been talking to a lot of people about property, and I'm very excited to be on this live stream with you to see what is the latest in Adeel Land. So tell us about the wonderful place called Adeel Land and what's happening. What's happening with property and all your call winning, my powerful friend.
It's always a very interesting space, the Australian real estate, and because it's very diverse as how it operates, there is not one particular method to the madness, as I should say. It's all evolving with time and different areas behaving differently. Every place has its own dynamics, local demographics. So it's very interesting. It's still doing very, very well. Some of the pricier markets, like something maybe 2 million plus kind of markets, are probably not as hot as they were before, especially when we talk about in areas, some of the pockets of Sydney and Melbourne. But anything which is sub 2 mil or sub 1.5 mil in the owner occupier space is still very demanding, and anything under 1 mil for investing is extremely hot cake right now, especially in good areas where there's some good economic drivers.
Incredible. And I was just going to say, Adeel, a few things and a lot of things that have come up lately. Of course, we've got crazy governments right now. We've had an amazing Joe Biden debate. It looks like Trump's getting back in. Our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is busy trying to put out little tax rebates and throwing trinkets to the market to try and re-win their affection. And you got mixed signals. You got people saying the RBA is going to increase rates. You got to say rates that are coming down. There's a lot of chaos. You see a lot of media manipulating the headlines out there. Adeel, you're a very smart man. You're an accomplished property investor like myself. Tell us the truth of what's going on.
You're very right. It's very chaotic, as it usually is if you try to get the information from media, because you really don't get information from media. It's
Yeah.
quite manipulated in every way,
Yeah.
and real estate is not very much different. But one important thing you mentioned over there about the tax cuts, and I would like to share that in this financial year, ATO has come up with a tax cut where a lot of people who are making their incomes from 80, 90 grand up to $150,000, they have got some good incentives. Their tax rate has
Hmm.
gone slightly down. And what
Hmm.
does that mean is that even if your salary is still the same as it was before, but suddenly ATO is actually charging you less tax, which means more income is landing into your bank account every week or every fortnight. And that bumps up your borrowing capacity. So I had this couple with me who we are working for their owner occupier property. Their borrowing capacity actually went up by at least 40 to 50 grand just because of that simple change, and their income did not increase at all. So that additional 40 50 grand was really important because now they can afford to buy the house that they really wanted for their family. So yeah, that's a very important point you make.
Yeah, I find it fascinating, and I love what you said before about how the media, the manipulation, the lies. And one thing I love about you is that you're driven by data. This is probably one of the many reasons why we get along, right? You and I are both data freaks. When it comes to LinkedIn and creating content, I'm very data driven. And when it comes to property loans and everything, you're very data driven too. And I want to ask you, because here's the reality of it, right? If you're going to buy an investment property, you're probably going to be a little bit out of pocket right now with the current interest rates and what markets are doing, which is
Yep.
totally reasonable. Totally understand. However, my take of it is that yes, you might be out of pocket $1,000 or $2,000 or even a little bit more every month, but because of how much the property is going up and the amount of money you're making, it's all worth it. And I'm the same. I own property as well. My cash flow, as the interest rates went up, my cash flow really, really went down.
Yep.
But the thing that keeps me going is when I look at the value of my property and how much money I actually have accumulated. I suppose that's it. That's the honest truth of it. Yes, there's a bit of short-term pain in terms of the payments we've got to make, but when you look at how much your property is worth and appreciating, it's absolutely incredible. And interestingly, one of the properties that we have is near a wonderful hospital. And the Deal medical property, that is amazing, right? So it's whilst my cash flow sucks, I absolutely love the property. So, Adeel, tell us everything. Tell us about your data, that cool spreadsheet you showed me. We're all ears, Adeel. Tell us how reality works.
Now, you made a very valid point, Ed, when you talk about the data and how the market has performed. We touched upon it in the beginning as well, that it's not one single property market in the country. And I just wanted to quickly share, like, uh, just as I shared this on my socials as well on my LinkedIn a couple of days ago, and I'm just resharing the same graph. It simply shows how the property market has grown since pandemic, since COVID, right? It feels like it was ages ago, but it was like 4 years ago only. And in the last 4 years, different cities have grown in different ways. And it's the same real estate, same houses, same kind of units, same kind of properties, but in different cities, different demographics. They have.
If I can jump in for a second, and it matches the color of your t-shirt, Brisbane, right? I'm based in Sydney like Adeel, but I go to Brisbane all the time for clients and work. And Brisbane is nuts. Like whenever I go to Brisbane, there's cranes everywhere. The city, there's like buildings going on everywhere. If you head out into the suburbs, there's old places being knocked down, apartments going up. And in fact, Brisbane, out of all the places I visit, Brisbane is absolutely nuts. There, you cannot look in any direction without seeing a crane or some kind of construction there.
Yep. So definitely, as you said, I mean, a lot of infrastructure spending is happening, and that is one of the key drivers for capital growth in property prices. That does dictate how the property prices will actually, in which way they will be moving, whether upward or downward. And that is what is happening in a lot of these cities. Especially affordability is also a key factor. For people wanting to buy in Sydney and Melbourne, it's very difficult for them to enter into the market because the house median value, especially in Sydney, is like 1.4, 1.5. But Melbourne is a bit down, and Brisbane has taken over from Melbourne recently, as you would know. But every city has its own dynamics. And as you can see over here, some of the smaller looking cities have performed actually well because they're more affordable, they have more diverse economy, there are more people being attracted to these areas because of interstate migration as well, just because of remote working and a lot of other stuff. So it's a very different kind of a market, and that's where I see a lot of potential for people. I know interest rates are high, I know cost of living is high, but that's where the affordability factor comes in. Can you service your loan? And if that's the kind of growth that you can get, right, there's no point that you should not be considering to get into Australian real estate right now.
Yeah. I mean, I'm with you. I think it's absolutely amazing. Like I've always said, this is a running joke, right? And by the way, your job's very safe. I've always said if I ever became a buyer's agent and property investor like you, relax, it's not going to happen, Adeel. I can assure you of that.
I would love to have you. I mean, I would just love if you want to join one day. I mean,
no. I'm saying I would stick to LinkedIn. But one thing I have really found is, is I love seeing all these trends. And one of the biggest things I've seen, again, I know I'm quite close to Brisbane as well and Sydney and all that. I know so many people personally in our business network that have moved from Sydney to Brisbane. So it's funny. It's this data, the personal anecdotes and what I see in my life is completely backed up by this data. And it's interesting because when I talk to people in Perth, Adelaide, and Brisbane, when I ask people, why'd you move there? They're always saying, you know what? I want cheaper property. I want a better lifestyle. I want to move to a state on the move. And it's funny, I really, credit to, Western Australia, pardon me, South Australia and Queensland. They're really states on the move, aren't they?
There are a lot of investing happening in some in the local areas, in the local councils. The councils are pretty active, and this is the average that we are talking about here. One thing we need to really be careful about is that not all the suburbs grow at the same rate, and that is where you really need to be very careful where you are buying at what point of time. If that area has already grown by 40-50% recently, then probably that's a time not to consider that particular area, because it will just not keep growing by 50% every 2, 3, 4 years, right? So you need to be very careful where you buy and where you don't buy. So that's where I think it's important that you look at the suburban level of data and not at the whole city as a big whole or a big bucket, I should say.
Yeah. And on that note as well, I mean, I know you access this data. You can access all the sales prices for a given suburb, can't you? You can work out that place next to the place you want to buy, what it's sold
Oh,
for, when it's sold for. You have access to all that, don't you?
heaps of data. Like me, we go through data like uh, a lot of supply and demand data, which talks about what infrastructure is coming up, what kind of people are living in, how many new houses are coming, how many houses are selling, how quickly they are they selling for a discount, or are they selling for more than the asking price, which essentially shows that there's more demand and more room for price growth. We are looking at vacancy rates. We are looking at some of the parameters as to how much income people are making in that area, what
Mm.
kind of people are living there, are they professionals, are they tradesmen, because that also kind of impacts the growth and the livability of that
Mm.
particular suburb in future. So the more the suburb is livable, the more attractive it is for young families, the more good schools, hospitals it has, the more good amenities it has, the more likely it is to have capital growth in the next 5-10 years. So yeah, a lot of
And
data that.
likewise, too, the opposite is true. If you have a suburb with a poor council, nothing's happening, you're not
Yep.
going to get the growth, or people are just going to get out of there, aren't they?
Exactly. I mean, it all comes down to how attractive that area is for people to have their families base over there and live over
Mm.
there, right? So that's really, really important. So you have to look at it from livability point of view, and also make sure that they're not just livability. Again, a lot of local demographic data that we look at, probably more than 25, 30 different data points. So if I start discussing about all of them over here, it will probably take a couple of hours, which I don't want to.
Yeah. And speaking of data, you had this very impressive spreadsheet you were showing me before, basically how the costs, the price, the loans and that work. Did you want to
Yeah,
take us a bit through that, Adeel, and give us some feel on that one?
yeah, fair enough. I would like to, I mean, for me, property investing is like a business, right? So in any business,
It's
you
not
need to
like
know.
it. It is. It's not like a business. Property investing is a business.
Beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of spreadsheet I will talk to people. And the reason we created this spreadsheet was a lot of people coming to us these days are like, oh, interest rates potentially may go upwards in the next 1 month or 2 months. I think I can't afford property. What if they go up suddenly too much? So I should rather not get into property right now.
Mhm.
Now, I said, okay, let's break it down. What does that going up in interest rate actually means for people? So this is a simple example for a recent client where we helped them buy a house worth 700 grand. So I'm talking about houses. We only deal in houses. We don't advocate for townhouses, units, or apartments just because we want more land component, because that is what grows in value. And if you
So,
buy a
so
big
just
house,
if I can just jump in there because that's
yeah,
a
sure.
really key point. So you're saying you don't touch townhouses or units. Why is that? Unpack that a little bit more. Why exactly is that? What do you mean by land?
So what I mean by land is, that's a very good question, Ed. So in very simple terms, there every property has two components. Like if there's a house worth $1 million, it will have a land component, it will have a land value, and it will have a house value which is built on top of it, right? So let's say the land is $600,000, the house was built for $400,000, so 600 plus 400 equals 1 million. So that's how we get the value of the property. Now, after 10 years, 12 years, if the same property is worth 2 million now, or 1.8 million now, it's because of the fact that the land component is more expensive, because the actual build on top, which was for $400,000, depreciates over time. It loses its value. And what it means, it's not 400K anymore. So the only reason the
Mm.
house actually grew in value was because the land is now more expensive. It's not worth 600K anymore. It's probably around 1.6, 1.7K, 1.7
Mm.
mil.
Gotcha,
So
gotcha. So
technically,
whatever you build loses value. As I think it's in one of the Superman films where Lex Luthor says, you, "The only thing that's finite is land." And he tries to build more land using the alien crystals from Superman's castle. I don't know why I brought that up, but I just had to.
I love that analogy, because as long as we are living on Earth, yes, land is finite. Once we go and
Yes.
start living on Moon, maybe things will change. I can't debate on that. But yeah, you're right. So it's the land that grows in value. That is how properties become more expensive. That is how people create wealth. That is how people create that legacy of property portfolios which they pass on to their children. It's
Yep.
because they buy properties which grow in value, And that growth primarily happens because of the land becoming more expensive.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So just coming back to that scenario where we will always advocate buying houses with land component,
Yeah.
and that is where this is a scenario where someone, let's say, I will run through this very very quickly. I don't want to spend too
Oh,
much
please.
time on this. Let's say someone buys a
Hey, just,
700.
sorry, just to jump in, I just want to say hello to our fans. We've got Margaret Martinez with us. She loves the Superman analogy. Good seeing you, Margaret. Ibrahim Sharma. I can't see all of you, but to our fans watching, big thank you. Like, share, comment. We can't see all your comments, but feel free to share this live stream. But we got heaps of cool people watching Adeel. I just want to let you know that.
No, definitely. Thanks for pointing that out. And thanks everyone for joining today's live stream. I hope you guys get some value and get some clarity as well if you're looking to buy that next property in this day and age of high cost of living. So, yeah, just to answer your question, Ed, this is a scenario where we bought a house for 700 grand recently. Now, the outgoing, it's a detailed spreadsheet. We have done this calculation on a 6.5% of interest rate. And this particular client had to spend $154,000 from their pocket, assuming a 15% of upfront deposit, right? Now that deposit can vary between 10 and 20%, which means their overall commitment, let's say if I take it down to 10%, then they only have to fork out 120 grand roughly, which will cover their stamp duties, their LMI cost, their initial buyer's agent fees, their solicitor fees, even their 10% deposit as well. So everything gets covered in there, right? Now, a lot of people know about it already. This is not the concern for people, right? They know this cost. Where they get stuck, where they really feel frightened, is what will happen later on. What happens if the interest rates go up? So that is where we have done this calculation, because the areas that we buy in, now that is where your rental income is really important. If you buy in Sydney, that is where rental income really suffers, right? You buy a $1.1 million house, your rental is 600 a week. And suddenly your out of pocket is 5,000 a month.
Yeah. Can I just jumping in there, right? I live in the lower North Shore of Sydney, and the yields are. And by the way, I don't own any property in the lower North Shore of Sydney, and I have no plans to. The yields are terrible. Like, I'm not kidding. Like, you'll see a property that's worth 1.2 million, and you can rent it for $600 a week. It's mind-boggling. Then you go to Parramatta.
Good for the tenants. Good for the tenants, right? It's good for the rent.
Then you go to Parramatta, Western Sydney, and you'll know this. You're a Western Sydney guy. When you go to Parramatta, Western Sydney, it's like the property will be worth $700,000, but rent for the same amount. So, just on that, why are the yields so different? Why does a place like Lane Cove, Sydney, for example, why is the rent so low relative to the property price? But then you go out to Western Sydney, Parramatta, and the weekly rent's the same, but the property value is much less. Why does it work that way, Adeel?
That's a very valid question. And to answer that question, Ed, people who want to live in a $1.2 million house, right? Now, if they can pay, let's say, $1,000 rent for that one, they would rather be better off buying a house worth 700, 800 grand and paying their own mortgage, right? So instead of paying that higher rent for someone else, they will prefer to buy their own home and start paying their mortgage. So that's where, as the property prices keep going up, especially in Sydney, when the houses are 1.2, 1.4, 1.6 mil, your rents don't follow that at the same pace. Your rents will increase, but not at the same pace, because suddenly people will realize, on an 800K old house, right, my mortgage would be 800 a week or 900 a week. So why should not I buy my own house? Because if I'm living here, why should I be paying $1,000 or $1,200 per week in rent? I would rather pay less rent or less more in mortgage and buy a house which is more affordable. That's where people start moving from more expensive pockets and start buying into more affordable pockets. So that is what is happening, has always happened in Sydney as well. And that is what actually makes people rent out properties which they can easily afford. And for properties which are much more expensive, it's very difficult to keep demanding higher rent for them, because that's where the affordability gets stretched out for a lot of people. So affordability plays a key part over there, right? I hope I was able to answer that question.
Yeah, very good, very good.
So if the prices go up, the rents just don't follow them. It's not a linear thing, right? So what we have found is, as long as you're buying in that sweet spot anywhere between 600k to 800k, that is still the right price point in Australia, not just Sydney, but in Australia, where you can get a good, decent house on a piece of land, not a unit, not an apartment, where you can get a house between 600 to 800 grand, 600 to 900 grand, and still get a rental of 700, 800 a week. That is what you want to be buying in terms of rental income, because that means your rental is around 5.2% or 5% or thereabout, right? So that is why I've highlighted this over here.
So just on that note, just on my previous example, a suburb like Artarmon or Lane Cove in Sydney would have a low yield, whereas Parramatta, Western Sydney would have a higher yield. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's perfectly right. And that's one part of the thing, that being a higher yield. As an investor, you want a good yield balanced with a really good capital growth as well. Now, in Sydney, you get really good capital growth. But the problem is, even if you buy in Western Sydney, you can buy a house for 900k or close to a mil. It will still rent for 700 a week. Yes, the yield is better than Artarmon, than Chatswood, but still it's not enough to actually keep you positively geared or close to being positively geared. You're still like $4,000 out of your pocket every single month just to hold on to it.
Hence, we're all talking about Brisbane, Adelaide, Perth, and all those places, right, Adeel?
And those are the areas where you can still get those properties in that 700, 800k price point, which are still growing really fast as per the graph I just showed a while ago, right? Where you can see all this huge growth that has happened recently. Perth, Adelaide, and Brisbane are way above Sydney and Melbourne, right? That's because of the affordability reasons. So that's where you need to be as an investor. Now, how does that impact your cash flow? That is the main thing that we are discussing over here. So this is a scenario for a client where they put down 120 grand for this investment purchase of 700k. Now, we have accounted for all their outgoing expenses moving forward. Like, they will be paying council rates, they will have insurance premiums, they will have property management fees, all that, blah, 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 blah. Even then, they will be only out of pocket by around 1,200 a month. And I know the next question, what happens if the interest rates go up, right? Okay, let's say the interest rates from 6.5 go to 7%. So what that means is that 1,200 becomes 1,500 a month. Now, if you are someone who can easily afford to buy that 15, who can easily afford that gap of 1,500 or 1,700 a month, for them, it still makes sense to actually consider property investing. The reason for that is because we are already on a high interest rate at this point of time. It may go slightly up, it may go slightly down, but definitely after the next 2 or 3 years, it will be going downward. That's what the journal consensus is, right? So that is where you are buying at a time when the interest rates are typically very high or close to being the maximum. And if you can forecast your cash flow for the next couple of years, next 3 years, which we have done over here in this scenario, where this particular client, I will go back to 6.5%. And what they're essentially doing is that they are paying 1,200 a month from their pocket, which means if you look at this column on the right bottom side, over the next 3 years, they will still be paying $45,000 from their pocket, right? Now, as a businessman, I would want to know, if I'm paying that 45,000 from my pocket for 3 years on an average, what am I making? Now, on a 700k purchase, our clients are easily making around $200,000 in the 3-year mark, which is close to 33%, right? So if you can get into a property in the good growth area today, where you can afford to pay, let's say 15 grand for the next 1 year or 45 grand for the next 3 years, but that property makes you 4 times that money, would you not be willing to go for that? That's my question.
Yeah, exactly.
Does that make sense now?
Yeah. Now, I think very well argued. I mean, it's only a fool would argue with you, Adeel. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, if someone is really stretched and they can't afford to go that far, I mean, they can't afford to pay 1,200 from their pocket every month, which can be the case with a lot of people, then perfectly fine. It's not for them. They should rather wait for now. But if someone can fork out that $1,000, that $1,500 for the next 2 years, 3 years, this is the best time for them to get into property, because they can make the serious money over here, because we know supply is very low, new properties are not coming into the market, which increases the competition, and then all the overseas migration which is coming, which is increasing the demand further, is making property prices go nuts. So it's anyone's call right now. I've done the whole spreadsheet, and the whole purpose of this spreadsheet was to give people more clarity that even if the interest rate goes up by 0.5% or even 1%, can you still afford that next property? If you can, go for it.
Yeah. Adeel, you are a powerful man, and I have to bring this up. You know, I have to talk about Trump. Of course you do, right? I can't sit on a live stream.
Don't you?
yeah. I can't sit on a live stream for 25 minutes and not talk about Trump, right? But the thing, the thing that's interesting about talking business and money is that, you know, the other day we had the Biden debate. Yeah, unless you've been living under a rock or in another dimension. You know, Biden had a terrible debate. Everyone's saying that we're looking at a Trump win. So when we have the American elections towards the end of the year, we're looking for a Trump win. Now, the reason why I bring up a Trump win, if we get a Trump win, that's going to be great for business. And if you remember how well the global economies were going under Trump, right? So to me, that's going to be fascinating. If we have a Trump win, you're going to see better global business conditions, which of course will flow onto an Australian election supporting a Dutton Liberal win. And if you get a Dutton Liberal win, that's good for business and money. You're going to see interest rates come down more as well. Because interestingly, right now in Australia, we have a Labor government, which is one of the reasons why interest rates are being jacked so badly.
That is one of the key reasons. And I think that will also have one more impact on the political situation. The global political situation is not very good with a couple of wars which are going on. Yes. And I think if Trump gets to the office, the likelihood is that those wars may actually come to an end.
Oh, yeah.
And that will have a really good positive impact on all the economies. I mean, who flourishes in wars? I mean, no economy can flourish in war unless you have a weapon business.
There you go. Yeah, let's not go there, Adeel. Let's not go there, Adeel.
That's not our domain.
Yeah, let's not go there. So I love having a LinkedIn account, but I was going to say, Adeel, we love you, LinkedIn. You're awesome. But no, I'm going to say, Adeel, you're amazing. And just so you know, obviously as well, just for our wonderful viewers watching, I've known Adeel for years. He's a great guy. He owns a lot of properties himself. He's a property investor and buyer's agent himself. So pretty much for a nominal fee, Adeel, you do all the work for people and help walk them through the process, and you connect them to mortgage brokers and everything. Is that right, Adeel?
That's exactly right. And it's all about understanding what you want, where you want to go, what are your roadblocks, and how we can help you. I mean, if you want to be connected with mortgage brokers or accountants for better tax planning, or with financial planners for overall cash planning, then more than happy to make those recommendations and connections. And that's where you really need to have the right professionals beside you, because they can just fast track your journey and make you reach your goals faster. So all in for it.
And the other thing as well, I noticed you're wearing this yellow t-shirt. What does it say on your shirt, Adeel? Do you want to model your shirt for us and show us what it all says?
I hope you can see it now.
Retire young.
That's what I love. That's what I'm working towards.
Yeah. What was interesting, I was actually able to retire. I actually was able to retire in my early 30s.
Oh, you were the veteran, right? You are a veteran.
10 minutes later, I thought, all right, let's get back to work now.
Yeah. I mean, it's about retiring with a purpose, not just retiring for doing nothing. It's about retiring with a purpose and not needing to work just to pay your bills. That's the whole concept. It's not about retiring and sitting on the side.
I'm going to quote our great friend, you know, Abu Khan, right? You know, our Indian friend from Canberra, Awais Abu Khan, right? Great guy, right? Great guy. He says it well, and I know he said it both to our faces. I love how Abu puts it. He said, it's not about retiring to do nothing. It's about retiring to choose what you want to do. I love that.
Exactly. He nailed it. I will steal that line. With his permission.
And he's really good. He's got lots of cars, lots of houses. He's always jet setting somewhere, putting me to shame. So.
Oh, he's a lovely guy. He's a great guy. Always fun to talk to.
Yeah. I was going to say big thank you, Adeel, to our fans and viewers around the world. Please collect. Please connect with Adeel because you're going to collect some great insights. That's what I'm trying to say. Adeel, before we finish up, please, if there's anything you want to say, we'd love to hear it.
No, thanks very much, Ed, for all the kind words. Thanks for being here today. I mean, anyone who wants to up their game, especially in the LinkedIn world, if you want to brand yourself in the LinkedIn space, you don't have to go far. Just talk to the person who's sitting right next to me. Just talk to Ed. Just reach out to him. He will make it as smooth as butter for you. Just have a word with the guy. He's awesome at what he does, and he's amazingly helpful. He's sitting here giving us his time at 8:30 at night, right? On a cold Wednesday evening. So thank you very much for that, Ed. I really appreciate your time.
And while we're here, I've got my phone next to me with LinkedIn open. Yeah, LinkedIn open on my phone. So after this, I'm going to be sharing our live on LinkedIn everywhere. So there we go.
Amazing.
Right
Yeah.
there.
My only tip would be for people, if you're scared, if you're not sure, if you want to get into investing in property, creating real wealth, real legacy for your kids, this is the best time.
Yep.
All you need to do is just speak to the right people and seek advice from the right people.
And the right people equals a deal. That's a fair understanding.
Well, it's totally up to you who you want to go to, but I'm happy to answer any questions if you have them. That's what I can say.
Pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Adeel, thank you so much. Appreciate you, my powerful friend, and love your work, all.
Thanks very much, Ed. Thank you very much for joining, and thanks everybody for viewing. Share your feedback. Put your comments down there. I'll share the contact details as well in the comments. Reach out to myself or to Ed as well if you have any questions, and we would love to hear your feedback about today's session. Thank you all. Have a good night. Thanks, Ed.
Anytime.